What looks like a setback is often a redirection. And that idea is difficult for many people to accept because pain has a way of narrowing our vision. When something falls apart, when a plan collapses, when a door closes without explanation, the first reaction is almost always emotional: frustration, anger, self doubt. We start telling ourselves that we failed, that we were rejected, that life is somehow working against us. But pause for a moment and consider another possibility: the possibility that what you call a setback is actually life stepping in to adjust your course. Not every closed door is a denial. Some are directions. There are situations you desperately wanted that, if they had worked out, would have limited your growth, drained your energy, or tied you to something that no longer matched who you are becoming. Yet in the moment, you cannot see that. All you see is the loss. All you feel is the disappointment. The human mind is wired to cling to expectations, to specific outcomes, to carefully constructed plans. So when reality diverges from those plans, it feels like something has gone wrong. But growth rarely follows the script we write for ourselves. Think about how often people chase things simply because they are familiar or comfortable. A job that feels safe but suffocates ambition. A relationship that feels secure but quietly erodes confidence. An opportunity that looks attractive but offers no real expansion. When those things leave your life, it can feel like theft, it can feel unfair, but sometimes removal is not punishment, it is protection. Life has a wider perspective than your current emotions. What you experience as rejection may actually be preservation. What you experience as loss may actually be liberation. What you experience as delay may actually be preparation. The difficulty is that none of this is obvious when you are standing inside the storm. In the middle of disappointment, clarity is rare, perspective is blurred, and so many people make a tragic mistake right there. They interpret temporary discomfort as permanent defeat. But consider this carefully. If every single thing you wanted had worked out exactly as planned, you might never discover your deeper strength. You might never explore paths you did not initially consider. You might never be forced to grow beyond your original limitations. Comfort can be seductive, but it can also be restrictive. Certainty feels safe, but it can quietly cap potential. Redirection, though uncomfortable, often carries hidden expansion. There is a powerful shift that occurs when you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And begin asking, what might this be guiding me toward? That question alone changes your posture. It transforms you from a victim of circumstance into an observer of possibility. Instead of resisting every unexpected change, you start examining it. Instead of assuming defeat, you look for direction. Because sometimes the path you lose is not the path you needed, and sometimes the collapse you fear is the clearing you require. Look back on your own life for a moment. Reflect honestly. There have been disappointments that later reveal themselves as blessings. There have been missed opportunities that saved you from long term frustration. There have been endings that created space for something far better. But while you were living through those moments, you did not celebrate them. You struggled, you worried, you questioned everything. Only later did understanding arrive. That is the nature of redirection. It rarely feels like progress when it is happening. It feels confusing. It feels unsettling. It feels like instability. But forward movement is not always linear. Advancement is not always comfortable. Sometimes progress looks exactly like interruption. Strength is built in how you interpret those interruptions. If you label every obstacle as proof that you should stop, you weaken your own momentum. If you treat every detour as evidence of failure, you drain your own confidence. But if you begin to view unexpected change as part of a larger shaping process, your resilience deepens, your patience expands, your ability to continue strengthens. You stop panicking at every closed door. You stop collapsing at every disruption. You stop assuming that difficulty equals defeat. And instead, you begin to stand with a different kind of presence, calmer, steadier, more grounded. And you begin to trust that not everything needs immediate explanation, that not every event must make instant sense, that sometimes the best opportunities emerge only after previous ones disappear. This mindset does not eliminate pain, but it transforms your relationship with it. Disappointment becomes information rather than identity. Loss becomes transition rather than termination. Uncertainty becomes space rather than threat. And this is where personal power quietly begins to grow, not in avoiding hardship, but in reframing it, not in controlling every outcome, but in mastering your response. Because you may not control every redirection life introduces, but you absolutely control whether you interpret it as destruction or design. So when something falls apart, breathe. When a plan changes, observe. When a door closes, resist the urge to declare finality. There may be a path ahead you cannot yet see, one that demands more from you, stretches you further, and ultimately leads you somewhere your original plans never could. Pressure has a way of feeling like an enemy when you are inside it. It feels heavy, uncomfortable, relentless. It makes your mind restless and your body tense. It convinces you that something is wrong, that life has become unfair, that the weight you carry is evidence of misfortune. But pressure, despite how it feels, is often a signal of something entirely different. It is not always there to crush you. Many times it is there to reveal you. Consider what pressure actually does. It exposes weaknesses you did not know existed. It forces you to confront limits you thought were fixed. It demands growth where comfort would have allowed stagnation. Without pressure, most people would never discover their deeper capacity. They would live within safe boundaries, never stretching, never evolving, never realizing how much more they could handle. Comfort rarely produces transformation. Ease rarely generates strength. It is resistance that builds power. When life applies pressure, something extraordinary is happening beneath the surface. You are being pushed beyond familiar territory. Your habits are being tested. Your patience is being examined. And while this experience can feel overwhelming, it is also refining. Pressure acts like a filter, separating what is fragile from what is durable, what is temporary from what is resilient. Think about the moments when you have grown the most. It was not during the periods of calm. It was not when everything worked smoothly. Growth surged during challenge, during uncertainty, during situations that demanded more from you than you initially believed you could give. Pressure forces adaptation. Adaptation produces strength. Strength creates confidence. Yet many people misinterpret pressure entirely. They assume difficulty means they are on the wrong path. They assume stress means they are not capable. They assume struggle is a sign to retreat. But pressure is not a verdict, it is a process. And processes are meant to shape, not define. Imagine a muscle that is never challenged. It remains weak, undeveloped, limited. But apply resistance, apply strain, apply repeated demand, and the muscle grows stronger. Not because strain is pleasant, but because strain is necessary. Human potential follows the same principle. Without challenge, capability remains dormant. Without demand, resilience remains theoretical. Pressure awakens what comfort conceals. It is easy to feel confident when circumstances are easy. It is easy to feel motivated when progress is obvious. But real strength emerges when conditions are difficult, when results are delayed, when uncertainty dominates. That is where character solidifies. That is where endurance deepens. That is where identity transforms. Pressure is not just testing your abilities, it is expanding them. Every demanding situation stretches your mental and emotional range. Every obstacle strengthens your problem-solving capacity. Every moment of stress builds tolerance for future challenges. What once felt unbearable gradually becomes manageable. What once triggered fear gradually becomes familiar. You evolve often without noticing it, simply by continuing. And there is something else pressure does that is rarely acknowledged. It clarifies priorities. When life becomes demanding, distractions lose their appeal, trivial concerns fade, focus sharpens. Pressure has a way of forcing you to decide what truly matters, what deserves your energy, what aligns with your deeper goals. In this way, pressure does not just build strength, it builds direction. But this transformation depends entirely on perception. If you see pressure as an attack, you resist it with anxiety and frustration. If you see pressure as a shaping force, you engage it with awareness and determination. The external situation may be identical, yet your internal response changes everything. One mindset creates exhaustion, the other creates growth. Pressure becomes destructive only when you believe it has no purpose. When you interpret difficulty as meaningless, your motivation erodes, your confidence weakens. But when you understand that pressure is often the environment where strength is forged, endurance becomes easier, persistence becomes logical, because now you are not simply enduring stress, you are developing power. You are expanding capacity. You are becoming someone capable of carrying greater responsibility, greater challenges, greater success. And that transformation is rarely gentle. Greatness is not built in calm conditions. It is built where demands are high, where expectations are heavy, where circumstances require more than convenience. Pressure is often the entry price for growth. Not because struggle is desirable, but because strength is impossible without resistance. So when life feels intense, pause before declaring defeat. When responsibility feels heavy, pause before doubting your capability. When challenges feel relentless, pause before assuming something is wrong. Pressure may not be there to break you. It may be there to build a version of you that comfort never could. There will be periods in your life that feel strangely quiet. No visible progress, no dramatic breakthroughs, no applause, no recognition. Days blend into weeks, weeks into months, and you begin to wonder whether anything is actually moving at all. Effort continues, but results seem absent. You work, you push, you try, yet nothing appears to change. These are the moments that test people in ways loud challenges never could. Because noise is easy to respond to, but silence plays with the mind. In silent seasons, doubt grows quickly. The human brain craves evidence, reassurance, signs that effort is producing something tangible. When those signs fail to appear, insecurity steps in. You begin questioning your direction, your abilities, your decisions. You look around and see others advancing, celebrating, achieving, while your own journey feels paused, invisible, stuck. But what feels like stagnation is often a phase of unseen construction. Not all growth announces itself immediately. Not all progress is visible. Some of the most important transformations occur beneath the surface, away from recognition, away from validation, away from the eyes of others. Just because you cannot measure movement does not mean movement has stopped. Think about how roots grow. They develop underground, hidden, unnoticed, long before an invisible structure appears.
No one applauds the roots.
No one celebrates their expansion. Yet without them, nothing stable can rise. Silent seasons function in much the same way. They are periods where foundations strengthen, where patience deepens, where internal shifts take place without spectacle. And this is precisely why these seasons are so challenging. You are asked to continue without external reward. You are asked to trust without immediate proof. You are asked to believe without visible confirmation. Many people struggle here not because they lack ability, but because they misinterpret quietness. They assume absence of results equals absence of progress. They assume lack of recognition equals lack of value. They assume stillness equals failure. But silence is not necessarily emptiness. Often it is preparation. Life does not always develop you in public. There are skills being refined, perspectives being reshaped, strengths being built during these quiet stretch. Chess. Discipline grows when motivation fades. Character forms when no one is watching. Endurance strengthens when rewards are delayed. Silent seasons force you to detach from constant validation and reconnect with something deeper: purpose, commitment, internal drive. Because when applause disappears, only conviction remains. And conviction is powerful. It is easy to stay committed when progress is obvious. It is easy to stay motivated when feedback is immediate. But silent seasons demand a different kind of strength. They require consistency without excitement, persistence without encouragement, movement without visible momentum. This is where many people retreat, not because the path is wrong, but because the silence feels unbearable. They mistake quiet for rejection. They mistake delay for denial. They mistake invisibility for irrelevance. Yet those who endure silent seasons often emerge with something extraordinary: unshakable resilience. They learn to operate without constant reassurance. They learn to trust long-term processes. They learn to detach from the emotional swings of immediate outcomes. Silence refines emotional stability.
It teaches patience in a world obsessed with speed.
It develops focus in a culture addicted to distraction. There is something profoundly strengthening about continuing when nothing appears to be happening. Each day you persist without visible reward, your discipline solidifies. Each moment you resist discouragement, your mental endurance expands. Each step taken in uncertainty builds a quiet confidence that cannot be easily shaken later, because you begin to understand something critical. Progress is not always loud. Growth is not always dramatic. Development is not always visible. Silent seasons are not interruptions of your journey. They are part of it. They are the stretches where internal alignment occurs, where air clarity gradually forms, where unseen adjustments prepare you for future acceleration. What feels like delay may actually be synchronization, life positioning pieces you cannot yet see. And perspective changes everything. Instead of asking, why is nothing happening? You begin asking, what might be developing that I cannot yet observe? That shift transforms frustration into curiosity, anxiety into patience. Silence stops feeling like absence and starts feeling like incubation. So when life grows quiet, resist panic. When progress feels invisible, resist despair. When recognition disappears, resist self-doubt. Something may still be moving, still forming, still aligning beyond your immediate perception. And often, the breakthroughs that seem sudden to the outside world were actually built during long periods of quiet persistence. Failure carries a weight that few experiences can match. It strikes at pride, shakes confidence, and whispers harsh judgments into the mind. When something does not work out, when effort does not produce the expected result, the immediate reaction is often deeply personal. People do not just say, this attempt failed, they say, I failed. And that subtle shift, that dangerous identification, is where the real damage begins. Because failure is an event, not an identity. Yet many people fuse the two. They treat a temporary outcome as a permanent definition of their worth. One mistake becomes a verdict. One misstep becomes proof of inadequacy. One unsuccessful attempt becomes a story they replay endlessly, reinforcing self-doubt with every recollection. But failure, when understood correctly, is not a judgment. It is information. Every failed attempt contains data. Every mistake carries instruction. Every setback reveals something that success often hides. Success can be deceptive. When things go smoothly, there is little the pressure to analyze, to adjust, to rethink. But failure forces reflection. It demands evaluation. It exposes weaknesses, blind spots, flawed assumptions. It compels growth by confronting you with reality rather than comfort. Failure is feedback in its rawest form. It shows you what did not work, where preparation was insufficient, where strategy needs refinement, where patience must increase. But this value is accessible only to those who resist the emotional impulse to retreat. Those who interpret failure as humiliation learn nothing. Those who interpret it as education gain everything. The difference lies entirely in perspective. Consider how often fear of failure prevents action altogether. People hesitate, delay, avoid risks, not because they lack desire, but because they dread the possibility of falling short. They imagine embarrassment, criticism, disappointment, and decide that safety is preferable to uncertainty. But avoidance has its own hidden cost. Nothing grows in permanent safety. Potential withers without challenge. Confidence cannot develop without exposure to difficulty. Those who succeed at meaningful levels are not those who never fail. They are those who fail repeatedly without allowing failure to define them. They treat mistakes as part of the process rather than evidence of incapability. They fall, adjust, learn, rise, and continue. Because mastery is built through correction, not perfection. No skill, no craft, no achievement emerges fully formed. Competence is developed through trial, error, refinement, repetition. Failure is woven into progress. It is not an interruption of growth. It is a mechanism of growth. Without it, improvement would be shallow, resilience fragile, understanding incomplete. But emotionally, failure feels final. It triggers self-doubt with startling intensity. The mind replays the moment, magnifies the error, imagines external judgment. Regret becomes loud. Confidence becomes quiet. And in that vulnerable state, many people make another critical mistake. They stop. They conclude they are not capable. They conclude the goal is unrealistic. They conclude the effort is pointless, yet stopping transforms temporary failure into permanent defeat. Continuing transforms failure into progression. There is profound strength in refusing to personalize unsuccessful outcomes. When something does not work, the productive response is not self-condemnation, but curiosity. What can be learned? What can be adjusted? What can be improved? This mindset converts frustration into momentum. Failure loses its destructive power when it becomes a teacher rather than a tormentor. And understand this clearly. Failure often precedes significant breakthroughs. The path to competence is rarely smooth. Progress frequently involves miscalculations, false starts, unexpected obstacles. Those experiences are not signs of inadequacy. They are stages of development. Growth is rarely graceful. Improvement is rarely comfortable. Advancement is rarely free of error. Each failure you survive without surrender strengthens psychological endurance. Each mistake you analyze sharpens judgment. Each setback you recover from deepens resilience. Over time, failure stops feeling catastrophic and starts feeling instructive because you recognize its role. You understand its necessity. You detach it from your sense of worth, and there is a liberating effect in that realization. Fear diminishes. Experimentation increases. Action becomes easier when failure is no longer viewed as fatal. Risk becomes tolerable when mistakes are no longer treated as identity threats. Growth accelerates. Perfection is fragile. So when you stumble, and you will, resist the instinct to dramatize the fall. Resist the urge to label yourself incapable. Resist the temptation to withdraw permanently. Failure is not announcing your limits. It is revealing your next opportunity for refinement. Resilience is often misunderstood. Many people treat it like a personality trait, something you are either born with or without, as if strength belongs only to a fortunate few. They look at individuals who endure hardship, who persist through difficulty, who rise after repeated setbacks, and they assume those people possess some rare natural toughness. But resilience is not an inherited gift. It is a decision made repeatedly, especially when circumstances make that decision uncomfortable. Every challenge presents a choice, not always an obvious one, not always an easy one, but a choice nonetheless. When pressure mounts, when progress slows, when frustration intensifies, you stand at a quiet crossroads. One direction offers relief, stepping back, lowering standards, surrendering to discouragement. The other direction demands effort, continuing despite fatigue, uncertainty, and doubt. Resilience lives in that decision. It is not the absence of exhaustion. It is a refusal to be governed by it. It is not the absence of fear. It is movement despite it. It is not the absence of doubt. It is persistence in its presence. Strength does not require perfect emotional conditions. It requires commitment stronger than temporary discomfort. Consider how the mind reacts to prolonged difficulty. Energy fades, motivation fluctuates. The initial excitement that fueled the journey begins to weaken. What once felt inspiring now feels demanding. And the internal dialogue begins, subtle at first, then increasingly persuasive. Maybe this is not worth it. Maybe this is too hard. Maybe I should stop. But resilience is built precisely in these moments, not when enthusiasm is high, not well. And progress is obvious, not when conditions are favorable. Resilience forms when continuation feels least appealing. Each time you choose to move forward despite resistance, something within you strengthens. Each time you refuse to retreat into comfort, your endurance deepens. Resilience is accumulated through repetition.
One decision rarely transforms a person.
But repeated decisions reshape identity. Every instance of persistence reinforces a powerful message to your own mind. Difficulty does not dictate your behavior. Discomfort does not define your limits. Temporary struggle does not determine permanent outcomes. And this repetition carries profound consequences. Over time, challenges that once felt overwhelming become manageable. Obstacles that once triggered hesitation become familiar. What previously demanded extraordinary effort gradually becomes part of your normal capacity. You do not simply survive difficulty, you expand through it. But there is an important truth many overlook. Resilience is rarely dramatic. It is not always loud, heroic, or visibly impressive. Often resilience is quiet. It is showing up when you feel uninspired. It is maintaining discipline when rewards are delayed. It is continuing routines when results are uncertain. It is choosing consistency over emotion, commitment over mood. Because emotions fluctuate, circumstances shift. Motivation rises and falls. But decisions establish direction. Waiting to feel ready, confident, or energized is unreliable. There will always be reasons to delay, excuses to pause, justifications to retreat. Resilience emerges when you act independently of those fluctuations, when your standards are not negotiated by temporary feelings. Strength is stabilized through decision, not emotion. Every time you endure a difficult moment without surrender, your psychological stability increases. S, you begin to trust your own persistence. Confidence grows not from ease, but from evidence. Evidence that you can continue even when conditions are unfavorable. And that confidence is powerful. It cannot be easily shaken by setbacks or delays because it is grounded in experience rather than optimism. Through repeated proof that you can withstand pressure, uncertainty, fatigue. You are no longer intimidated by difficulty because you have practiced enduring it. Resilience transforms how you interpret challenges. E, instead of seeing obstacles as threats, you begin to see them as part of the terrain. Instead of viewing struggle as abnormal, You recognize it as inherent to progress. Difficulty loses its power to surprise you, to paralyze you, to derail your momentum because you have built tolerance, you have built decision based strength. Hardship does something few people initially recognize. It does not merely challenge your circumstances, it challenges your identity. When life becomes difficult, when pressure intensifies, when obstacles refuse to move, you are not simply dealing with external problems. Something deeper is taking place. The way you see yourself begins to shift, sometimes subtly, sometimes violently, because comfort allows you to maintain illusions. Difficulty strips them away. In easy seasons, it is possible to believe you are more patient than you are, more disciplined than you are, more emotionally steady than you are. When conditions are favorable, weaknesses can remain hidden. Limitations can remain untested. But hardship has a way of exposing everything. It reveals how you react under stress, how you think under pressure, how you behave when outcomes are uncertain. Adversity is an unforgiving mirror. It shows you parts of yourself you might prefer not to confront: impatience, fear, insecurity, SS, self doubt, avoidance. And this exposure can feel unsettling because it disrupts the image you hold of who you are. But this disruption is not destruction, it is reconstruction. Hardship is an environment of identity formation. When familiar strategies fail, adaptation becomes necessary. When old habits prove insufficient, growth becomes unavoidable. You are forced to think differently, act differently, endure differently. The person who could navigate calm conditions is no longer enough for the terrain you face. A stronger version must emerge. A transformation rarely announces itself gently. It often arrives through discomfort, through frustration, through moments that feel like personal inadequacy. You may find yourself thinking, why is this so hard for me? Without realizing that the difficulty exists precisely because you are being stretched beyond your previous capacities. Growth feels awkward because you are operating outside your familiar identity. Every serious challenge asks a silent question: will you cling to who you have been, or will you expand into who you must become? Many people resist this process unconsciously. They interpret hardship as evidence that something is wrong rather than evidence that change is underway. They attempt to preserve old patterns, old mindsets, old comfort zones, even when those structures can no longer support their evolving reality. But identity cannot remain static in a dynamic life. What once worked may no longer work. Who you once were may no longer be sufficient. Hardship accelerates this realization. It forces you to confront gaps between your current abilities and your desired outcomes. It demands new levels of patience, discipline, emotional control, persistence. In doing so, it reshapes not only what you do, but how you define yourself. You begin to notice subtle internal shifts. Situations that once triggered red panic now produce focus. Obstacles that once caused retreat now provoke problem solving. Delays that once generated frustration now cultivate patience. Without consciously declaring it, your identity evolves. You are no longer reacting as the person you used to be. This is reconstruction in motion. Yet the process can feel deeply uncomfortable because identity is tied to familiarity. The mind prefers known patterns, predictable reactions, established self concepts. Growth requires abandoning parts of that familiarity, stepping into psychological territory that feels uncertain and unstable. But instability often precedes expansion. Every meaningful upgrade of self demands temporary discomfort. The disciplined individual is built by resisting impulses. The confident individual is built by enduring difficulty. Hardship is not interrupting your development, it is engineering it. There is a powerful realization hidden inside struggle. You are not just trying to overcome challenges. The distinction is profound. Instead of seeing hardship as an external battle alone, you begin to recognize it as internal construction. Life is not merely testing your existing identity, it is pressuring you to build a stronger one. And stronger identities are not formed casually, they require tension. They require experiences that stretch emotional and mental limits. Over time, if you engage this process consciously, hardship stops feeling like random punishment. It begins to feel like rigorous training. Each difficulty becomes a catalyst for refinement. Each obstacle becomes an opportunity to strengthen traits that comfort never demands. Patience deepens, emotional stability strengthens, self awareness sharpens, endurance expands, and gradually, almost imperceptibly, you become someone different, not because you wished for change, but because circumstances required evolution. So when life feels demanding, when challenges feel relentless, consider the possibility that something more than problem solving is happening. You may be undergoing reconstruction at the level that matters most, the way you perceive your own capabilities. Not everything will make sense when you want it to. That is one of the most difficult realities to accept, especially in a world that glorifies certainty, quick answers, and immediate clarity. The mind craves understanding. It wants explanations for every delay, every obstacle, every unexpected turn. When those explanations are absent, frustration grows, doubt creeps in, and patience begins to weaken. But the process of growth rarely unfolds with full visibility. Often, you are moving through chapters of your life where the purpose is not immediately revealed. You are asked to continue without knowing exactly how the pieces connect. You are required to act without guarantees, to persist without complete reassurance, to trust without concrete proof. And that is deeply uncomfortable because uncertainty challenges the human need for control. When you cannot clearly see the outcome, the mind begins generating worst case scenarios. It questions your decisions. It magnifies risks. It tempts you to pause until clarity arrives. Yet clarity is frequently the result of movement, not the prerequisite for it. Many people unknowingly trap themselves here. They delay action while waiting for perfect confidence. They hesitate while waiting for absolute certainty. They stop while waiting for visible confirmation. But life does not always provide those comforts in advance. Progress often demands motion in the presence of ambiguity. Those who insist on knowing every detail before, moving rarely move far. Those who accept uncertainty as part of the journey develop a powerful advantage. They learn to operate without constant reassurance. Trusting the process is not passive optimism. It is a disciplined persistence. It is a decision to continue applying effort even when immediate results are unclear. It is the ability to tolerate periods where the path feels uncertain, where progress feels slow, where outcomes feel undefined, because processes reveal themselves over time, not instantly. Consider how often understanding arrives only in retrospect. Experiences that once felt confusing later appear logical. Detours that once felt frustrating later reveal hidden necessity. Delays that once felt unfair later prove beneficial. But during the experience itself, none of that clarity is available. You are navigating without a full map. And that is where trust becomes essential. Trust does not mean blind belief that everything will be easy. It means recognizing that not all variables are visible at once. It means accepting that development unfolds in sequences you may not immediately comprehend. It means resisting the urge to interpret temporary uncertainty as permanent failure. Uncertainty is not evidence of misdirection, it is often evidence of complexity. Growth is rarely linear, progress is rarely smooth, outcomes are rarely predictable. Demanding immediate clarity from a long term process is like expecting a seed to justify itself before it has had time to grow. Development requires patience, consistency, endurance, and impatience is a powerful disruptor. When people lose trust in the process, they make reactive decisions. They abandon efforts prematurely. They change direction impulsively. They retreat not because the path is wrong, but because the absence of immediate results feels unbearable. But endurance changes everything. When continue despite uncertainty, something important happens internally. You strengthen psychological stability. You detach your motivation from constant external validation. You build a capacity to function even when outcomes are not immediately visible. That capacity is rare and incredibly powerful because life will repeatedly place you in situations where certainty is unavailable. Careers, relationships, ambitions, personal growth. None of these come with guaranteed timelines or perfectly predictable trajectories. The ability to remain steady in uncertainty becomes a decisive strength. Trusting the process is ultimately trusting your willingness to continue. It is confidence not in immediate outcomes, but in sustained effort. It is understanding that progress is often occurring even when it is not yet measurable. It is the refusal to let temporary ambiguity dictate permanent decisions.
Patience is not weakness.
It is strategic endurance. When you accept that clarity frequently follows persistence, anxiety begins to lose its grip. You stop demanding instant explanations. You stop interpreting every delay as danger. You stop assuming that lack of visibility equals lack of progress. Instead, you develop a steadier mindset. You continue working. You continue moving. And over time, the very uncertainty that once felt unsettling becomes tolerable, even familiar. There may be connections forming beyond your current perception, developments unfolding outside your immediate awareness, progress occurring without dramatic signals. And pause for a moment of honest reflection. Are you demanding certainty before continuing, or are you willing to trust that some of the most important outcomes only reveal themselves to those who persist long enough to see them?